So it seems the video fall down, internet or something. So welcome all to Satsang. We continue to make just broadcasting to Instagram because of the retreat. So next Wednesday we will rejoin as normal. Let's make some more silence, waiting for others to come. So today we're going to talk about a very important subject, a difficult subject, a subject that gives birth to a lot of theories, and that is detachment. So more or less all spiritual disciplines or spiritual practice, it is creating a set of circumstances that will enable you to work whatever is there to be worked. So even if you may need to have a certain specific spiritual practice, different from individual to individual. But even if you put the same spiritual practice to a different group of individuals, they will have different experiences. They will experience different difficulties. And the difficulties, they will surface, the same circumstances will be able to make different difficulties arise. And that depends on strong sides, weaker sides of each individual. So spiritual practice, it is a very complete and complex overall subject, but looking at the point which is important today is the fact that it will create the circumstances that you will need to work things through, things that need to be worked. It's not that it solves immediately, but it will bring the opportunities to be solved. And the way that it can be solved is according, of course, to the motivations, the real motivations that underlie any spiritual investment. So, a seeker of truth knows he or she is undressing itself. This means from the superficial layers, from the complex superficial layers of the character, down to the more inner, more personal, more intimate layers of being. All these layers, he needs to undress them. So everything which is a part of my world, my belongings, my relations, all of this, these are superficial outer layers of being. And as you are in the superficial parts, it's very difficult or impossible to reach the core. And this is where the seeker of truth wants to come. And it's like, to reach the core of an orange, you have to peel it, take everything around, or an apple, maybe it's a better example because there's a core there. So to reach to the core of the apple, you have to take everything which is surrounding it until it gets perfectly exposed, the seeds of the core. So in the same sense, the seeker of truth knows that this is what he needs to do, because only when he reaches the core, then the solution becomes possible. Without reaching the core, impossible. And this is where he opposes the seeker of well-being. The seeker of well-being, he wants to keep the whole apple. He knows there's some rotten parts in the apple and he wants to fix them. He wants to improve that apple, to get the best out of that apple and even to increase that apple. So with the same teachings, with the same set of teachings, they have different goals in mind. And with different goals in mind, they have different perspectives, different understandings of the same teachings. So detachment is one of these big things. Because if you don't get out from the surface, you will not reach the core. And as you are taking care of your little life, there will be no room for real surrender, for the real vision of the spiritual mechanics, because you are keeping the illusion of control and you're playing. It's just a play. So it's very easy to play in your safe space, but it doesn't give many fruits. So as long as you're controlling your safety, you may psychologically repeat to yourself that none of this is mine, everything is God's, and let God's will be done, and let me just take what comes, and I possess nothing, and la 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 la. But if this is not an actual experience, it will mean nothing. And eventually, accessing the core, it's not possible. So I see these. It's very rare to see someone standing up really into detachment, embracing the opportunity to see God's hand playing in their lives, even at an instinctive level. Because when you're in control, okay, you may see, oh, this is God's hand God is helping me. Maybe you can see that in the negative aspects of your experience, that God is helping you also. But it's completely different to be in a situation where, for example, you're drowning and that experience is so intense and you still are thinking, this must be God's will, and I surrender. So why am I using this extreme example? Because this is more or less similar than when you don't have control, when you have let go of your attachments, of your possessions, everything which gives you security. There's many different types of possessions, not just money or material possessions. There's also relations, people that can support you, and all of these things. So once you let go of all these things, really, it's not solving the issue. It is creating the circumstances, the opportunity to work it. Because if you're not, then you won't be able to have the same kind of experience. And you will not see how things rise from within in this intense circumstance. It's just like scratching the surface. You cannot go deep in that because you don't have the actual experience. You're missing the key ingredients. Oh, I'm comfortable, I'm safe, I know if I have some problem, I have this to back me up. So you cannot go deep into detachment. And that is completely different. And detachment is a key issue, a central issue. It's not, we just look at the traditions, spiritual traditions, monks, nuns, sadhus, sages, saints. The majority of them embrace a path of renunciation. And every seeker of truth has to embrace a path of renunciation. If it is actual renunciation, if it is renunciating the attachment to things and not really things itself, it doesn't matter. What matters is attachment has to be worked. And a seeker of truth which is eager, you will do whatever is possible according to his eagerness. And it is much more difficult to detach from objects while objects are still there. And it's not that it is impossible, it is more difficult. And the majority who does this, they are just playing spirituality. It's just a way of working things without exposing themselves to insecurities. And this is a vision of the seeker of well-being. Well, in the ultimate aspect, this is not something that you decide. It's something that guidance points you to. And whatever it is pointing, it is your path to follow. But let's take this to an aspect of reflection. And if it is playing in your backyard, in your safe place, then, like I've explained previously, the depth that it can come, it's very shallow, very shallow. And for example, you have detached yourself from something, either everything or you just chose one thing to test it. Sometimes it goes like this. Okay, so I'll choose this and I'll detach from this. And if you're serious, you'll be tested, because that detachment will create circumstances that in which you will be tested to see how deep is your detachment, how real is your detachment, how sincere is your detachment. And the fears that were behind the need to be attached will surface. And if you resist, you will have the opportunity to reach that detachment state. And plus a bonus, a very, very important bonus, which is to see the divine playing in your life, to see really directly in first hand that you really don't have anything and God is taking care. Taking care not always means that it is doing what you expect him to do, but that he is bringing the circumstances, bringing the things you need really to move faster in the divine direction. So this is doing the best for you. Not taking care of your life that you will not feel any difficulty. No, that's not taking care of you. First, because, well, you are an omnipotent, omnipresent being. So what help do you need, really? So in theory, there's no help needed. In practical terms, you feel that need. So that illusion needs to be break. It needs to be broken. And this is where God's hand comes. He will give you the necessary for you to continue in his direction, but not too much to distract you. Sometimes it happens, but that's specific circumstances. I will go there if I don't forget about it. And it's quite common for seekers to, in the beginning, so detachment, sacrifice, okay, so I throw everything away, whatever that means, and I embrace that path and blah, 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 blah. And they do it for a specific time. And they imagine that by doing that, it is solved. Nothing else will be required, and then it's paradise. Eventually it will come paradise. But that's not really how it goes, because the majority of times it's unavoidable that this detaching is a kind of investment, is a kind of investing. It's like, okay, God, so I let go of this, you give me that. And eventually, that which is expected, not coming. Not coming. Not coming. Still not coming. And not only that, but other things that are precious to you are being asked. Give, 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 give. It doesn't matter what it is. It matters is that it is precious. And precious has many meanings. But let's focus on this meaning. It is precious in the sense that it gives a sense of continuity to the character, that it feeds the character, even if it is just with hopes of a future. So all of these things, so intensifying spiritual practices, for example, it makes the fire grow more and more. And if you're in the investing mode, that will mean that you will have to resist the fire. Not only resist, but survive the fire. Because the fire of meditation, of spiritual practice, starts burning the character, starts burning whatever is precious to the character. And if he is in an investing mode, that means that he is not really in the right attitude. So the intensity of his efforts, because they are, even if there are wrong motivations, there are right motivations at the same time. And these right motivations are making him increasing the intensity of his spiritual practices. And this is creating a friction against the wrong motivations. One of them has to be victorious, the other one has to lose, eventually, completely. But until then, it's, well, you win some, you lose some, and let's see how it goes. Because all the wrong motivations need to transform. So with time, those decisions that you've made that concern detachment will be tested deeply, because all your expectations will be frustrated, fortunately, and that gives you an opportunity to clarify your motivations, to improve them, to align them with what is presenting itself. But if those right motivations are not strong enough, or sometimes they are strong, but the other ones are strong also, and you haven't understood your sense of urgency correctly, you still have the illusion of control, then you may fall. And falling is something that happens a lot of times, many times, to many seekers. And it's when you fall and what you do in that falling that starts determining the direction that you're going to take. Because usually, in this moment where it is falling, those instincts that I've talked about previously, that you are provoking by creating the circumstances of detachment, throwing everything away, you have provoked this instinct level of reaction and worked on it. And if you didn't, if you worked on your safe space, then this will be activated by fear, of course. And what you do next, this counts. And usually what seekers do next is they try to get everything back again, or they try to build everything back. They try to go back to where they were, because it was a quid pro quo. I give you this, you give me that. If you don't give me that, I will go back to this again. And this brings a lot of clarity to those who have been through all of this. There's other examples also. There's the examples of seekers giving all their stuffs away, and then they come to this void of there's no profit in it, no return. At least from their point of view, from their values, from their set of values. And there is no return coming. So, and they cannot get it back also. So they begin, or they cannot build it also again. So they become resentful against what they did and all of that, and say it was wrong and this and that, because it was an investment. And as it was an investment, it was full of greed. And with greed in your eyes, you cannot see the divine hand. Even if you see it, deep down, it will be seen, even if with wonder, but it will be seen as a right, not as a blessing. And this makes the complete difference. And as you see things as a right and not as a blessing, you will not have what it takes to move forward in a real living spiritual liberation process. Because you're missing the magic, so you're blind. So understand that spiritual practice is a way to create conditions. It's one aspect, a very important aspect. Conditions that eventually will be met, will be tested. So in the beginning, and the beginning can be in the first years or 40 years later, it doesn't matter. But when it starts serious, and there's a moment where it starts serious, where the calling comes intensely, and that you start giving steps, real steps. And with this also it comes responsibility. And sometimes seekers are begging for something, they are begging for an opportunity, they are begging for a chance to live a real spiritual process, to feel God's communion, and they are being listened. It's being listened. God's listening. And God's answer sometimes cannot be heard, but it is there. In some form, it is there. But you know what? The most interesting part of this is that usually God's answer, how do I put this? It's actually your answer to what you're asking that counts even more than God's answer. I will explain this. Because, well, when you ask for God for help, He will give it. Especially in the first time, second time, third time, easy. Then it becomes more difficult. Why? Because if you have wasted those times, if God satisfies your needs again, you'll just continue in an endless cycle of wasting time and being deluded. So sometimes this cannot be answered. You have to wait. And by waiting, the level of importance that you give it will increase. And this will help you in the long run. But there is God's answer, and then there is your answer. And your answer cannot be overrun by God. God doesn't want to do that. What does this mean? Sometimes you ask for an opportunity, and not in the first time, not in the second time, but after that, because you have wasted others and you have realized it, and you come to a point of desperation where you're really asking. But then, as it is given to you, then you are going to answer your pleas. You are going to answer them with your actions into the nearest and long-run future by upholding to that, remaining firm, continue to embrace the challenges that God puts in front of you without giving up, without turning back. So whatever you're pleading with God at this moment, you will have your chance again and again to answer to yourself. So if you got into a moment of desperation and you're asking for God for an opportunity, for another chance, understand that if and when it comes, that you will do your level best to honor it without wasting it again, because you're the one who's going to answer your calls. Because usually what happens is things are asked, they are given, then opportunities are thrown away because of other values that come, worldly values. that overcome. So after you go through this and you turn your back on guidance, on God, on your path, then eventually you are going back to that point of desperation, and you will have to go even beyond that, because that turning back was your answer to your pleas, to your suffering, the suffering that you were experiencing in that moment. So eventually, it's you that asks. And as it moves from one opportunity to another, it always becomes more difficult. Well, because firstly, to create the same impact that was created previously, that has the same potential of transformation, that means of breaking your beliefs, the intensity has to be bigger because you were exposed to something. So to get the same impact, it has to be a bigger intensity, or else it won't work. And bringing you to the level, to the point of zero, that is the point. So there's this idea that, okay, spirituality, so this is a gain-gain situation. So I keep everything that I have, I will improve what I have, and expand what I have. Yes, it is like this, only not the way that you imagine, because it is undressing yourself until the core, until nothing else is there. No me, no mine, no me in the future, nothing, just me and God, and that's it. So the seeker of truth works for eternal communion, not for a better tomorrow. An eternal communion is eternal now, merging with God, or self-realization. It's the same. It's just the amount of sweetness which is involved. But that's a different story. So detaching yourself from whatever attachments you have, in practical terms, is the fastest way towards that direction. But doing the act in itself is just the beginning. It's one thing, for example, for those, if you're going into a forest and you see some fruits here and there, very few ones, small ones, and you pick them and you taste, oh, this is good, this is actually nice. And you collect some and you rest in a place and you eat, and oh, now I'm getting hungry. So I'll get to my reserves and I pick up some food and I eat it. Another thing is going through the same forest and you have nothing else to eat. And you will have to eat whatever is there. So your levels of anxiety, everything will be completely different. One thing is doing this in a forest next door to your house. Another thing is doing this into the forest with no house, living in the wild. So the circumstances create a very different experience. And understand, instincts have to be mastered. And without exposing yourself to this instinct level of experiences, there will be no mastery. So you may become wiser, knowledgeable by reading, studying, reflecting on things. Yes, but that will always be superficial unless this work goes from the conscious level up to down to the instinct level. So if you're not provoking these situations that brings these instinct level of response, of acting, then you're doing almost nothing, because eventually you will reach a point that you will be exposed to situations of instinct level, and you may know everything that is need to be known, and you will fall down. You will see that you know everything you have to do, you know what's right, but you cannot do it. You don't find the strength, you don't find what it takes to do it, because in terms of instinct, it wasn't mastered. It wasn't even touched. So the seeker of truth is using these spiritual disciplines, wisdom, as detachment, for example, to create the circumstances where he depends solely on God, nothing else, so that he can see its magic working. He knows that the medicine is not always sweet, so he sees God's hand in the bitterness and in the sweetness alike. He knows that God is guiding and he is surrendering. And he is embracing the next experience as it comes. And he is trying his level best to put aside whatever expectations his mind is creating, because the mind has a life of itself, of its own, and it's always creating something to drag you into that narrative. This is why silence is a must, because you may be full of the best intentions, but your mind will create narratives to make them dirty, to take you into them. This is why there is the mental concepts and there is mental knowledge and all these rational, and there is faith. Faith. We've heard of blind faith, which is detached from knowledge, from reason. Well, I have to be a little bit how do you say this in English? Spiritually incorrect in terms of expectations and a lot of things. Because what does this mean? Well, usually when someone says that, oh, your faith is blind, you had blind faith and you did this and that and you got this result. Usually this conversation, it's value-based. So if your values are worldly values, you will expect worldly rewards. If your values are spiritual values, you will expect spiritual rewards. And the biggest reward in detachment is detachment itself. Is the silence, is the peace that you get from it. The power to be still, that nothing has the power to make you invest or come out from that stillness. Then there's the bonuses, and the bonuses are the opportunity to see God's hand playing in your life and blessing you with sunshine or with thunderstorms. Doesn't matter, everything is a blessing. And you will have the opportunity to see it, not just to play with concepts. But if you're expecting some kind of other rewards, if you are making an investment, you will have the expectation of other kinds of rewards. They will be, of course, frustrated if everything goes right. If they're not frustrated, then something bigger is not right. But that's probably some other issue for a different satsang or forbidden one, whatever. And eventually, like I've heard An example, simple example. Oh, I've lived in an ashram dedicated for 12 years and nothing, so I quit. What was the nothing? You'll have to evaluate what were the expectations. And what takes time is transformation. I will explain. It may be fast or slow, according to the level of stubbornness, to the level of understanding present, to the level of hope, which is based on these things. So if you're making an investment, which is incorrect, you were expecting certain returns from your investment, and there's an amount of time that you can wait, because whatever is coming from the ego level cannot wait that long. And 12 years may be too long, or maybe not, depending on the level of many things. But eventually it will come to a point that either you let go of those expectations or you give up. And usually what happens is seekers give up. They don't give up their expectations. They give up the continuous investment. And it becomes clear why they were there. So depending on what you're trying to see, that will make your experience different. If you're looking at the subtle aspects, the important aspects, which is God communion, communion with that spiritual aspect of life, and letting go of everything else, then it will be blessing after blessing. For you, that will be your experience. But if you're expecting other kinds of rewards, then it will be just frustration upon frustration upon frustration. And in the beginning, it's unavoidable to go through this because, like I've explained, you have opposite motivations in the same place. And one has to gain, the other one has to lose. They have to change the proportion so that you can grow spiritually. And it is a path of undressing, undressing, undressing. So detaching yourself clearly, in practical terms, it helps you to be able to have a clear vision and a practical circumstance on depending on God solely, and not wasting 1 minute focusing on something else except that communion. And eventually, of course, you will have to deal with all impurities that are involved, because worldly motivations, worldly values, they talk about impurities at the level of what's highest. So all these impurities have to be cleared, because all spiritual practice brings fruit, sweet fruits. But many times, fortunately that there's an intelligence taking care. So many times you will not get the fruits. They will be kept somewhere. And seekers tend to despair because nothing is happening and this and that. without understanding that's a protection. But eventually that protection can only last so long, and some of the fruits will have to come. And this is the problem. If you have not worked your humility, simplicity, and all these things, if they are not strong, the fruits will come and both sides will eat, and both sides will become stronger. So if you have broken the balance and you're working your, especially humility, and there's an imbalance here on the lower aspects and the higher aspects, where the higher is stronger, then both will grow, but the balance will not be a problem. But if you haven't worked as hard as you should on humility, then those fruits will have an impact very, very strong, and can stop whatever it was what was being done. It can kill the process, and it can twist it in a way that it will take a long time to come back to that point, or even a lifetime or even more. So if you're engaged in your quest for freedom, understand that everything counts. And if you're applying yourself 100%, and it appears that nothing has happened, well, if it appears nothing has happened, there's two things. Either nothing is happening and you're not applying 100% as you thought, or nothing is happening because you're giving the opportunity to work certain things. For example, if your motivations are worldly in nature, you'll be in despair much more sooner. And to maintain your investments, you will have to work on this despair. So you'll have to work on these impurities, because they cannot continue both. For a while, yes, but eventually you will reach a breaking point, and then another breaking point, and another breaking point, until either it breaks or it transforms. So the monk makes certain vows, dresses in a certain way, so that he is constantly reminded of what's most important, so that it's like creating a circumstance where he is forced to live these higher principles and being transformed by them. Either you do this or you don't, but a real seeker of truth has to live that experience innerly. That is unavoidable. And as long as you are making your spiritual efforts, your meditations and all of that, and at the same time taking care of your life, it's not going anywhere. Because it's very easy to, okay, no, but God is taking care, oh, I surrender everything. Like there's a teaching of Karma Yoga that says that whatever you're receiving, dedicate it to God, it's not yours. But it's easy to do that when it's falling on your bank account and all of that. And because it is missing the instinct level that I was talking about. And eventually, winter always comes. So, if it is summer, autumn, spring, this is the time you have to prepare for winter. So the seeker of well-being thinks of these times to enjoy. The seeker of truth sees these times to work, to prepare to winter. Because not only winter is not a punishment, but it will be seen as a punishment from the seeker of well-being. It was grace all along, then punishment, where he can barely survive. The seeker of truth knows that summer, autumn, spring are the time he has to prepare for winter. And winter is a big opportunity, a big blessing to deeply test and to deeply break inner beliefs, to deeply transform. They are tough moments for sure, but they are full of potential. It's not by accident that wiser souls in reincarnation, sometimes they choose what is deemed by others as bad births. Taking birth in very, very challenging circumstances, poverty, violence, and all of that. Because these souls know that the more difficulties there are, more potential there is. Of course, it has ups and downs. So it's more difficult to engage. But if you do engage, your vision of life will be completely different and you will move upward very fast. So with taking birth or looking at these cycles of life, it is the same. So when the weather is nice, is fine, is where you prepare yourself, where you provoke these instinct-like situations so that you can work on them consciously, enduring those inner currents of despair and all of that. So that when time comes and when winter comes, instead of being dragged by the waves, you can surf them. It's always difficult winter, but it can be very, very rewarding. It is actually the best time of all. The best time of all. The seeker of truth, as he is in the conflict situation, in pains and difficulties and all these things, yes, he is suffering, yes, but there's a part of him that says, haha, it's moving. But then it comes those parts, which is unavoidable also. Not in the beginning, but then that there will be times of more bigger peace. And this longer peace, if the seeker of well-being arrives at this place, oh, he thinks it's a blessing. Well, the seeker of truth doesn't see it as a blessing. It sees it only as a weight. He has to wait in that situation until the next cycle of crisis, which is working at deeper layers of the mind, comes. But he knows that it's in that moment that is potential. Because peace without self-realization is just waste of time. The seeker of truth wants self-realization alone. He's not there for circumstantial peace, but for truth, for liberation. And if he is not self-realized, it means layers of impurities are there, of illusion. And if crisis is not erupting, they are not being touched. So everybody, according to their level of attachments. You see, an attachment is something that's not just harmless there. There are fears behind. There's a lot of things, and it takes you a lot of time to invest, to maintain your security, whatever that means for you. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of investment. It takes you away from the divine. And this is a price too high for a seeker of truth. Many theories are written about, especially about detachment. Oh, you don't need to do that. You just have to do this. Oh, you just have to. Because there are very few that can actually deal with this instinct level of experience. Because mastering instinct means, it's like riding a wild horse. If it is taming a wild horse, it's different because they tame it by force. But learning to ride a wild horse, it's different. You will not change the nature of the horse. You will change your nature in relation to it, all your reactions. And this is very, very difficult. It's going against nature. And this is what self-realization means, this path towards self-realization. So in meditation, in yoga and meditation, you are reversing the currents, because everything which is being experienced is through the senses. The senses are materializing. They are not recognizing. And as you're meditating, you're reversing these currents and removing them and moving them upwards. So it is going against nature. Against nature, against Maya, against what seems to be natural, what seems to be. And this is where you really see that the body-mind complex is an instrument of delusion. But you have to earn the right to see it. And that means learning to ride the waves. So the seeker of truth is creating the circumstances where he can live these things in a willing manner. Because eventually it will be thrown inside them. And I've heard this many times. Why God is allowing this to happen to me? I've been so dedicated to God, so doing everything He wants. Is there a reward there, expectation involved in this crying? For sure there is. For sure. Because if it was just for God, this would have no importance whatsoever. And it would increase the bond of trust, of faith, instead of making all these questionings and all of this. And saying, so there's no point. What this means is, there's no point continuing to invest because my needs are not being met according to these values. This is what it means. And your actions, your attitudes, this is what you're saying to God. I don't really want you for you. I want you because I want your kingdom. I want to enjoy your kingdom, not you yet. You're just a means to an end. But truth, God, you, the self, all words of the same thing. That is the end. It's not a means to the end. And you see, it doesn't matter how great your vision of the divine is. The majority of time, you will be adapting all of that to the life of that little insignificant character. So detachment. So it doesn't matter. And attachment, detachment, it's not a matter of how much do you have. It's the relation. And I know that this sentence is twisted, so it doesn't matter how much I have. I just have to work that relation towards it. It's true, but that's not usually the way it's used. It's just an excuse to maintain attachments. But then if it is a living process, many times it isn't, so no problem. But when it is a living process, then you fall, and you fall hard, and you fall deep. And to come out of that, it's difficult. Especially when you have spit in God's face during the process, and this happens a lot of times, and you don't even see it. What you see is that you will not be seeing anything. An example, for example. So a secret, this is a real example, not mentioning from who it was, doesn't matter, but someone pleading for God to cut his head off, in a sense, cut individuality, individual identity. And next day, he was walking around in India and he lost his wallet. And there was the money inside for the rest of the traveling, for all the things, all the expenses and all of that. And there was his identity documents inside. If this was a seeker of well-being, he would say, oh, but I'm dedicating myself now, I lost my possessions, how will I continue here, what will happen, and all of this, and despair would come. But it was a seeker of truth. So he looked at that and said, this is a clear sign. Identity, worldly identity was there and was taken away. So where do you look? How do you see? It reflects the values that you are embracing. And if that kind of worries about money would have come, the seeker of truth would have seen, oh, yes, so this is in the right place, but this needs to be worked because I'm still suffering for this. And this would give him perspective. So it's not even also what is rising that matters, but what you're doing with it that matters. And never, ever turn back. That is the worst thing you can do. It's like you've lost the race to the marathon. And as you reach the end of it, you see that you weren't prepared enough. And you shoot your both legs in the kneecaps. So what chances do you have of preparing yourself better to actually finish the race or win the race or whatever you want to make with this example? Turning back to the old, it's like shooting both your kneecaps. Because if you didn't succeed, if you have lost every chance of growth in that cycle of experience. Don't throw everything away, and at least embrace the humility aspect of that situation. You failed, you didn't work properly, so stay with your failure. Embrace it as a way of gaining more humility, because for sure the lack of it was involved in your failure. There's always something to gain from the experience. If you cannot gain the highest, at least gain something. At least gain something. So, detachment, creating the circumstances to put your life in the hands of God and live accordingly to that. That is very important. It's a must for any serious seeker of truth. If you're somehow avoiding your fears, avoiding to deal with the instinct level of yourself, it's just make-believe. And when winter comes, you will fall down. So when you look at spirituality, at the quest for liberation, and you imagine it to be easy, then you're naive. It is difficult because what's involved is the highest. And there's a lot of interest that goes against it. It's a game. The will to continue, to persist because, well, he's not excited about it. I'm looking for the word, but I'm not finding it. Hope you understand. But for the seeker of truth, what matters is that it is possible. It's not about being difficult. It's not what it counts. Is it possible? And if it's possible, that's what he needs. That's only that what he needs. Nothing else is required. And it's very easy to live in God's communion, to have perception of God's hand when you give the actual, concrete steps in that direction. As long as you're with some kind of control, as long as you're taking care of your life, it's very, very, very difficult to have this perception. Okay. So that's it for today. Next satsang will be Wednesday, 9:30 Brazilian time, UTC -3. Until then, make the best use of your time. Make it real. And just reminding everyone who is interested, the next silent meditation retreats, 10 days, 10 hours a day. It's from the 1st of August to the 12th of August. Okay.